Hey everybody, this is Dream, and I wanted to start off by saying thank you guys for liking, commenting, and subscribing. And if you haven't on a video before, feel free to do so on this one. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, and yeah, so let's go ahead and get into this particular slate. We have a nice little 6-game slate on FanDuel. It's actually a 7-game slate on DraftKings. The FanDuel slate doesn't include the second Texas-Miami game, which is included on DraftKings. So just keep that in mind if you're utilizing either video to set your lineup for a different site, just for the top picks in general, because you're going to miss out on some players for DraftKings in this particular video. So with that said, let's go and get into the games themselves. So I have 4 teams that are pretty stackable. Toronto being one, Cincinnati being another, the Dodgers being one, and then the New York Mets. And so I think especially on FanDuel, you can definitely, kind of pick and choose between those teams and make yourself some pretty nice stacks, because most of the pricing on FanDuel is pretty dynamic in the aspect that there's nobody that's super expensive where you can't afford them usually. Obviously, there's a couple guys, but not like DraftKings where there's a whole bunch of dudes that kind of fit in that, where you just have to find so much value. You can still use some of the best players in the league on FanDuel without too much issue. So let's go ahead and get into pitchers. Now, some people have asked me about how I decide on pitchers, and so there's really 2 things. You want pitchers that are going to last throughout the game, like get through 6 innings at least, and get strikeouts. And obviously getting, the less runs, the better. Now, however, one of the advantages on FanDuel that's not true on DraftKings is that strikeouts are valuable on both sites, but they're much more valuable on FanDuel. If you give up a run, you only need 1 strikeout to really offset that. So if you got a guy that gets 10 strikeouts and he gives up 2 runs, it's not even that big of a deal. But we're on FanDuel, on DraftKings, that would hurt you a little bit more. And so, here, I always prioritize strikeouts first, and then I look at length of game and, win chance and stuff like that. But strikeouts are super important, and I find that that's the best way to get yourself in the cash on GPPs and stuff, is to just go for the big guys, because first of all, the players themselves are less expensive on FanDuel than they're on DraftKings, so you can afford to pay up for pitchers very easily compared to DraftKings, which makes it a little bit harder. And so you might as well pay for the guys that you think are going to get in the 35-40 point range on this particular site. And really today we have 2 of those guys. The first one being Framber Valdez. Now, he doesn't have as much upside as Spencer Strider on this slate, but here's the thing about this guy. He's in the last 21 games he started, he's scored at least 29 points in every single game. That's pretty good. And you can see it here. His one 29-point game was against Cleveland. And you have to go all the way back to the very start of the season to May 1st to find a game where he didn't score 29 fantasy points. And that was just really the first 4 games of the season, and then ever since then, he's been better. And then if we look at his innings pitched, he's almost always over 6 innings. Yeah, he's had a couple games where he's given up some, 3 runs or whatever. But even if he does that, it's not killing him, because he's also getting strikeouts, which we're seeing, really solid strikeout numbers here. A couple games were done, but okay, so he gets 34 or something, like whoopee. He's a super safe option, and he has the best matchup against Detroit. And so, you can't really complain with that situation. Now, Spencer Strider, on the other hand, he has a little bit higher upside, but his downside is a little bit higher. He has tendency to have a couple games here and there where he gets sub 10, which that's not too much of a risk with Valdez in this particular matchup. So, he even has 80-point upside if he gets the strikeouts going, like he has a couple times this season. So, how do you choose between these 2 guys? Well, as we get closer to the game, the Detroit sets their lineup and San Francisco sets their lineup, then we're going to see what kind of, what batters they're going to be pacing, and that's going to really affect the strikeout likelihood of each of them. Now, I do think Strider's probably in a slightly better position simply because he's playing in San Francisco, but I think both players are completely viable, And so, check an hour before the game and figure out which guy has the higher strikeout rating, and that's who I would probably go with today. because they both have super high upside in these matchups. Pretty much everybody else, like Chris Bassett, the problem with him is really the fact that he is a little bit more limited on the strikeout perspective. As you can see, he's got a lot of games that he hits a little bit lower, and so he's kind of capped on his top tier, scoring in that aspect. And he's not in a bad situation, but I don't like guys against the Chicago Cubs all that much, and so I think he's less of a viable option. And then most everybody else is either against a good team that you don't really want to go up against, or it's just not an ideal matchup. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the catchers and first baseman. Basically, I have 5 guys here for us to choose from. Freddie Freeman is the first guy. Now, he's been hitting the ball extremely well. His price has come up as a result. Excuse me. But he's definitely somebody that you have to consider on this particular matchup. The next guy is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Excuse me. Now, he's been a little bit hit and miss lately. He's kind of due for a home run, and so I'm just, I've been kind of thinking he's going to get it soon. His price is still a little bit high, but it's not too terrible compared to what kind of output he can put out. But we do want to hopefully get him in a very plus matchup, and he definitely has that here tonight against, potentially Yanni Chirinos for Tampa Bay. So we'll see who they end up pitching for sure, and that might affect that a little bit. But right now, it looks like he's probably a really solid option. Then we have Pete Alonso. He's actually just way too cheap for what his potential production is in this particular game against, the Javier Assad or something like that. Anyway, he's got a really plus matchup here, and yeah, he's been a little bit hit and miss lately, but he's been hitting some home runs, and so I think he's in a really good, solid shape to do well in this particular game. And then we have Will Smith, the catcher for the Dodgers. He's somebody that can help you get the stack to. If he is a starter, sometimes Austin Barnes ends up starting, and so you do have to keep an eye on that. But he has some really good potential in this particular game. And then finally, we have Christian Walker. Let's see if I can find him here. Yep, here he is, for Arizona. And his price is pretty good for his production as of late. I like what he's been doing, and I think he's in a really good matchup against Tyler Anderson. So we got some pretty good options there. We don't have any super inexpensive options, sub 3,000, which is, if we put in Valdez, say, we have to get a couple guys under 3,000 in our lineup. But there's plenty of value other places, and I think that this catcher/first base position is some place that you're going to want to try to maximize your, get the best guy at the best position in this particular one, just because there's plenty of guys in other areas that are less expensive. So let's go into the second baseman. So obviously the overall guy is Jose Altuve, who is just absolutely just destroying the balls of late, and he's in another position to, Houston looks like they're going to have a explosion today against Detroit, and so that's another reason I like Valdez too, because Houston's probably going to win this game very easily. The next guy I really like is Jonathan India. Cincinnati looks like they're a really good spot, and it's a very stackable team, and a lot of their guys are pretty inexpensive, just like India is here, and he's averaging 13.39 fantasy points per game for the last 10. Then the next guy I got is Michael Chavis for Pittsburgh. Now, he hasn't been quite as good, but he's in a really good situation in this particular game. He's kind of a Hail Mary option, boom or bust, but he's super cheap, and if you need to save money, you can do it with him. And the next guy I like, and this is probably one of my favorite options here, and you can play him at second or outfield, is Jeff McNeil. He's been hitting the ball pretty well, and I really like what he's been doing as of late. Though he does have some kind of boom or bust mentality, he's got a really nice plus matchup in this particular game. And then the last guy is Vaughn Grisham for Atlanta. Now, obviously, the Atlanta hitters are a little bit capped because they're in San Francisco, which makes it hard to hit home runs. But Grisham has been playing pretty well of late, and so I like his situation for this particular game and his price as well. So let's go ahead and do the third baseman. And so I'm going to mention Alex Bregman here. He is a top option, but he has been kind of hit and miss lately, so you want to have to take that in consideration. I definitely like Altuve better from Houston, In fact, there's a couple other guys from Houston that I like a lot better than Bregman, just simply because he's been kind of slumping. But in the last game, he did hit a home run, so maybe he's going to get out of it finally. The next guy I like here is Brian Hayes. Uh, for Pittsburgh. He's just in a nice little plus matchup for his position and his batting style in this particular game. Obviously, he's a little bit a hit and miss kind of guy, and just like Michael Chavis is. But I do think Pittsburgh has some upside in this particular game. The next guy, and I think this is probably my favorite cheap option, super cheap option at least, is Spencer Steer. He's just been playing really well, and you can see in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 8 games, he's gotten enough fantasy points to make you happy, and he has home run potential, and he's just a good player in general right now as a young player in the league. And then my next guy is Austin Riley, who obviously has been playing really well. He's been hitting lots of home runs as of late. He had a couple games in the middle against Seattle that weren't quite as good, but he did hit a home run yesterday, and I think he's in another position to have a really good game against San Francisco. You know, he has the opportunity in that kind of game to get a couple doubles and stuff like that. So the next guy I really like is Justin Turner for the Dodgers. I think he's just absolutely been tearing up the ball lately. So many big games, and I look for him to continue doing that in this nice plus matchup against Arizona. He's averaging a whopping almost 18 fantasy points a game. So that's the third baseman. And then let's go and get into shortstops. So I have a few pretty good options here. Trey Turner being one of them for the Dodgers. I don't like him as much as some of the other Dodgers simply because of his price. Being 3,900 is a little bit high. Despite the fact he's just been absolutely killing the ball lately. He is a good player. He's averaging 15 fantasy points a game, and so you have to like him just because of that. But I do think that you could probably pay up or down a little bit to get better options here. The next guy I like is Francisco Lindor, $3,800, obviously, about the same price. And he's kind of boomer bust, but the Mets are in a good position here. Wander Franco is somebody I like for the Tampa Bay Rays. He just came back from injury in the first couple of games. He's done pretty good, and so I look for him to have a decent game in this matchup for him. My favorite play at this position is Bo Bichette, but obviously his price is extremely expensive, and obviously for a good reason. Look at these games: 63, 43, 34, 27, and he got some 6s and 16s and everything mixed in. But he's just been playing off the charts good. He's averaging 25 fantasy points a game for the last 10. That's absolutely insane. And, you know, if he can come where any are close, then that's going to be great. Not only that, but his team is really in a good position to have a good game. And then the last guy that I like is Jeremy Pena, who finally seems like he's starting to get out of his slump. He's having some good games as of late. He's still a little bit hit and miss, but if he got a home run the other day, and that seems to have gotten him into getting some hits. He's been getting hits every game for a while, actually, except for one. So it's just a matter of him, you know, getting hits when other guys are on base. And Houston's in a really good spot in this particular matchup. So then let's go and get outfielders. And we actually have a lot more value at this in the outfield as well. I'm going to mention Jordan Alvarez because he's kind of in a similar situation that Bregman is in. He hadn't really been hitting the ball all that great, but he's had a couple of decent games, and so he's kind of very boomer bust in this situation. But I felt like he needed to be in the write-up because of his potential. Mookie Betts has kind of been playing extremely well of late, and so I like him as well. But to get into some of the value guys, I like basically there's 3 guys on the Cincinnati Reds. Jake Fraley, the first one. Just a super plus matchup for him. He's been absolutely just destroying the ball when he gets home runs and stuff. And I really like him in this up tempo game for Cincinnati. You know, they're not always the best team, but in this particular situation, they're at home, places that really helps them as well. And this should be a pretty decently scoring game. Another guy I really like is Ronald Acuna. And I just realized that I skipped over the other Cincinnati players, but I'll get right to it. I really like Acuna in this matchup, pitching-wise, stuff like that. And so I think he has to be mentioned. The other guys I like from Cincinnati are TJ Friedl. TJ Friedl has absolutely been playing well. He's not as big of a home run threat, but he's been scoring points, and we like scoring points. he's probably actually the top option outfield on DraftKings, and he's close to a top option here on FanDuel as well. And then Aquino, he has absolutely been murdering the balls when he's had some really big games when he's played. And you can see this 21, 43, 29, 12. He's extremely, his batting average doesn't obviously help, but when he's at home, he typically does better. And so I really like him in this particular situation. Now, again, he's very boomer bust. He's a very secondary or Hail Mary type option. But if you need to figure somebody in at $2,200, he's somebody you could do it with. So the next guy I like is Brian Reynolds for Pittsburgh against Cincinnati. Another guy that's been kind of boomer bust, but he's got some upside playing at Cincinnati against bad pitching. Then for two more guys that are low, not too expensive, Brandon Nimmo for the New York Mets. I think he's in a great position. He's been hitting the ball pretty well as of late too. Obviously, he had one really big game, but he's been getting 9 or 10 fantasy points a game, and we can definitely live with that as price point. And then David Peralta, he's pretty inexpensive here, and he's been playing pretty good. So obviously, he's had a couple off games, but he has some real potential in the right matchups, and this is definitely a situation where he's got the good matchup. And then finally, I've got Kyle Tucker for the Houston Astros, and he's been batting better than some of the other Houston Astros. I think he's somebody that if you're doing a Houston stack, you got to throw him in there along with Altuve, and you'll do pretty good. So that's pretty much what I have for this write-up. I think we have a lot of good value options at every position, pretty much, with the exception of maybe the catcher / first base. But honestly, we do if you just want to dig into like the catchers, like depending on if some of the, if let's say that Will Smith sits or the Toronto's catcher Jansen plays or something like that, you could kind of sneak in one of those guys. But overall, I think it's a really good slate, and I think it'll be a pretty good scoring one. I think we have 2 or 3 teams that are going to have really good scoring days. So hopefully you guys can do well. And also, if you haven't joined Discord, feel free to join it. It's down in the description below. Patreon link is also down there if you're interested in that. And thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day.